After episode 12 was released, I received a message from a friend. He said he enjoyed the last episode and added a question. With my hot yoga schedule, the high protein plan is required. With some craft beer, he added in parentheses. What are your favorite protein sources? I will mention that at his early 70s, this man is in great shape, always full of vitality and in good mood. Since day one of this podcast, I hoped to help others so that more people could enjoy the benefits of improved health and aging without unnecessary suffering. Therefore, it was a pleasure to receive a question from someone who can be a role model to others. This is what I said in my response. My favorite foods would be ribeye steak, lamb and oysters. I can't afford to only eat my favorite things yet though. I do eat pork because it's cheap, but I practically don't eat chicken anymore. I also like to make soups where I throw in various types of protein since I don't eat veggies. Sometimes I eat salmon and catfish. I used to enjoy good beer and wine, but since I went for ketogenesis, I stay away from alcohol because it contains sugar which throws us out of the ketogenic state. I haven't stated that I will never drink alcohol or eat carbs again, but the fun part is that I don't crave them anymore because my gut microbiome has changed. It's the bacteria that often cause cravings. We exchanged a couple more lines, and I added that his question inspired me to script episode 13, in which I'd go in more depth to address the topics. If the style in which I explain things resonates with you and you also have questions, please don't hesitate to ask like my friend did. I'll address your questions in my future episodes. This is the podcast Il Zebra's Transformations. I am the Il Zebra. The main purpose of this podcast is to continue journaling so that I keep healing. This is not a diary, meaning that my records won't necessarily reflect events in their chronological order, nor do I promise that the details will be accurate. If listening to my processing of traumas helps someone else along the way, I'll take it as having accomplished something for the higher good of all concerned. But now, without further ado, let's start. When Katzman discovered the gangrene on one of his monthly visits, "She won't last a month," he said. He said the same the second month, the third month and the fourth, and now she's dying in the heat of the back bedroom. God in heaven, my mother said, what's she holding on for? The summer my grandmother was supposed to die, we did not chip in with the Greenbounds to take a cottage in the Laurentians. My grandmother, already bedridden for 7 years, could not be moved again. The doctor came twice a week. The only thing was to stay in the city and wait and let her die, or, as my mother said, pass away. It was a hot summer. Her bedroom was just behind the kitchen, and when we sat down to eat, we could smell her. The dressings on my grandmother's left leg had to be changed several times a day, and according to Dr. Katzman, any day might be her last in this world. It is in the hands of the Almighty, he said. It won't be long now, my father said, and she'll be better off if you know what I mean. A nurse came every day from the Royal Victorian Order. She arrived precisely at noon, and at 5 to 12, I'd joined the rest of the boys under the outside staircase to pick up her dress as she climbed to our second-story flat. Miss Bailey favored absolutely beguiling pink panties decorated with lace, and that was better than waiting under the stairs for Cousin Bessie, for instance, who wore enormous cotton bloomers, rain or shine. This is how Mordecai Richler's story, "The Summer My Grandmother Was Supposed to Die," starts. And I am starting this devil dozenth episode marked with this fragment because it reminds me of the time my maternal great-grandmother Emma was dying from gangrene, and how, regardless of the situation, life was insisting on going on. My parents had transported Emma to her daughter's house, who was my grandmother Elsa. They thought my sister and I were too young to see it, and perhaps to smell it, so we were never brought there to visit her. My sister and I used to lie awake talking about our grandmother. After she dies, I said, her hair will go on growing for another 24 hours. Says who? Daddy Kravitz. Do you think Uncle Lou will come from New York for the funeral? I suppose so. Boy, that means another $5 for me. Even more for you. You shouldn't say things like that, or her ghost will come back to haunt you. The fragment I just read reminded me of a friend who was about to have a birthday party when my great-grandmother was dying. She wanted to know if I would be able to come. I told her I didn't know if I would be allowed to because everyone at home was somber and it might not be appropriate for me to have joy. I felt torn because I was somber too, but I also didn't want to miss the party. I didn't. About 2 decades later, my grandmother Elsa, Emma's daughter, died of cancer. The metastasis had spread into her lungs and eventually she choked to death. Choking to death is not the way I want to pass because I know how scary it feels. I deal with occasional dry drowning episodes. I want to leave this world peacefully when the time comes. You might think I've started in a dark mode today, but I don't see it that way. Only when we look into the shadow side, we can bring the light of hope to the world. I'm revealing the health conditions my maternal ancestors dealt with to pick up from my previous episodes where I was talking about quote-unquote bad genes and how I choose to manage them. Dr. Garry Fettke has been an orthopedic surgeon for the last 30 plus years, and he's seen a lot of patients at the end stage of their chronic disease who need to have their legs and arms amputated. He remembers a situation from 2016 when he had a diabetic patient in his 40s and was considering amputating both of his patient's legs. He ended up amputating one leg, and as the patient was recovering at the hospital, Dr. Fettke came for a control visit and saw the patient sitting there and eating ice cream despite his sugar levels being out of control. "Why are you eating ice cream?" Dr. Fettke asked, and the patient replied that they told him he could have it. That caused Dr. Fettke to look at the National Hospital Food Guidelines, in which it was indeed said that it was okay for diabetic patients to have ice cream 3 times a day, with morning and afternoon tea and supper snack such as biscuits and cookies. After that, Dr. Fettke started challenging the National Hospital Food Guidelines and was shut down by the hospital management, which followed the instructions of the Coca-Cola and cereal industry. He was told he was acting out of his professional scope. He was targeted since then. In one case, for inappropriately reversing someone's type 2 diabetes on the Australian national television. Ultimately, after he defended himself, he received an apology, but not a public one. As regards his orthopedic patients, Dr. Fettke explains that the problems they deal with are a visible result of the process that develops over a long time, sometimes decades, because people keep abusing their bodies by eating foods that harm them. Those foods give people low-grade inflammation throughout the body. Dr. Fettke's patients typically end up with microvascular disease narrowing their every blood vessel, chronic inflammation in the tissues, fibrosis in the tissues, poor circulation, poor local immunity, so that when bacteria or fungi get through any tiny scratch of skin into their tissues, the body can't fight it. The only solution is to chop a limb off up to the place where there's reasonable circulation. Dr. Fettke says he sees the same problems with patients who need hip replacements and knee replacements, namely that it is a metabolic dysfunction that causes chronic inflammation because of the patient's poor, abusive dietary habits. Dr. Fettke says 80 to 85% of the world's population, 93 in the US, live with metabolic dysfunction, and that 90% of the conditions his patients deal with can be prevented by altering their diet. As culprits, he names ultra-processed foods, carbohydrates, and seed oils in particular. He says it's getting worse, remembering that when he started as a surgeon, he didn't see that many cases where patients' toes had to be chopped off, but towards the end of his practice in the state hospital, it was every week. And the predictable scenario is that after a while, another toe needs to be cut off, then a foot. And the death rate within 2 years after the below-the-knee amputations is 50%. Dr. Fettke says we do not need carbohydrates or even vegetables. He says he wouldn't eat an apple a day. My great-grandmother and my grandmother had vegetable gardens, and my mother learned from them. Recently, my mother had a serious health condition and needed surgery. I've been trying to share what I know with her to help her to change the trajectory, but the traditions and beliefs about what is healthy in people are strong, so I'm not sure I'll succeed. Carnivore expert Professor Thomas Seyfried is an American professor of biology, genetics, and biochemistry at Boston College. His research focuses on mechanisms of chronic diseases such as cancer, epilepsy, and caloric restriction diets. Professor Seyfried says that 80% of cancers can be prevented. He claims that cancer is not a genetic disease, but a mitochondrial disease of energy metabolism. To remind you, mitochondria are organelles found in most cells, except red blood cells, and they produce ATP, or energy. Did you know that we all make cancer cells many times a day? But our immune system is designed to clean it up, and usually it succeeds. A cancerous cell is a damaged cell that acts in an uncontrolled way, which I am about to explain. To paraphrase Professor Seyfried, damage to cells can happen due to a number of reasons, such as exposure to chemical carcinogens, exposure to radiation, old age, viral infections, and others. Sometimes those damaged cells outright die, but sometimes they can continue living damaged. In a healthy cell that operates without disruptions, mitochondria will use oxygen to produce ATP, and each cell will do what it is supposed to do to maintain homeostasis in the body. Namely, a liver cell will do what it is supposed to do, a kidney cell will do its thing, and so on. But if a cell is damaged and there is an acute interruption of oxygen supply, the mitochondria are unable to produce ATP. As I said, sometimes such a cell dies, but if it can survive, it starts living in a chronic disruption state, and with interrupted respiration of its mitochondria, the cell will slowly adapt to energy production from fermentation, where oxygen is not needed. The components that are needed for fermentation are glucose and glutamine. Over time, cells that use fermentation for energy will begin uncontrolled division, which is the definition of cancer. As these cells divide exponentially, they become dominant, and their weakened and dysfunctional mitochondria can't stop such uncontrolled division. Therefore, it makes sense to me to try to restrict carbs that turn into glucose and glutamine, because that will starve cancer cells and help the body to clean the damaged stuff out while in the ketogenic state. Dr. Chris Palmer is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist and an expert in treating mental health disorders and mood disorders that can lead to serious brain disease. Dr. Palmer uses ketogenic diet to treat various mental health disorders, including depression and schizophrenia. He explains how depression, anxiety, and ADHD are brain disorders that start from metabolic dysfunction and impaired mitochondria, and how low-carbohydrate diets increase mitochondrial turnover to improve mental health. I've listened to multiple interviews with Dr. Chris Palmer. Inspired by the exchange of texts with my friend today, I'll share what Dr. Palmer says about how alcohol affects humans. He explains that alcohol is actually a mitochondrial toxin. Mitochondria, of course, are crucial for brain function, and when they are compromised, everything downstream is affected. I knew it from the experiences other carnivores have shared that alcohol becomes especially potent on a carnivore diet, and I tried it once after starting this journey. I can attest it's true. Dr. Palmer explains that when we drink alcohol, it's processed by the liver into different substances. One of those is acetoacetate, which, interestingly, is also one of the main ketones our body produces during ketosis. The problem is acetoacetate is toxic to mitochondria. So if you're drinking while in ketosis or even just following a low-carb diet, you're essentially doubling up on this compound. That means the mitochondria are hit harder, and the effects of alcohol are amplified, not just in terms of how it feels, but in the actual damage it can do to the brain on a cellular level. He also shares something that has really gotten under my skin, that people who drink frequently can start to shift their brain's preferred fuel source. Instead of using glucose, the brain starts to rely more on acetate, another alcohol byproduct. Over time, that can lead to glucose hypometabolism. Basically, the brain doesn't use sugar well anymore. Dr. Palmer's work reminds me that our biochemistry is not neutral. It's deeply shaped by what we put in our bodies. Alcohol on a high-carb diet is one thing. Alcohol on a ketogenic diet is a whole other storm. I'll stop here to summarize. I started the episode by sharing about an exchange of text messages between me and one of my listeners, and said that in this episode I would expand on the topics touched in the exchange. After the intro, I grabbed your attention by sharing a somewhat somber, somewhat humorous narrative that reflected a fictitious situation that could as well be real, because I have memories of my great-grandmother dying from gangrene. From there, I jumped to another memory of my grandmother dying from lung cancer. I transitioned into the following part by saying that I don't want to pass that way, and that we can change what to so many still seems to be a genetically pre-programmed destiny. Next, I referred to what Dr. Garry Fettke says, that harmful foods cause chronic inflammation in the tissues, fibrosis, poor circulation, and local immunity, so that when bacteria or fungi get through the skin, the body can't fight, which starts gangrene. Poor circulation in lower limbs, particularly in the feet, is a common complication for people with diabetes. This is primarily due to damage to blood vessels and nerves caused by prolonged high blood sugar levels. I think that my great-grandmother had undiagnosed diabetes because she was thin and diabetes was a rare thing or was rarely diagnosed at that time in Latvia. If it's true, it wasn't because she ate cookies and ice cream or cooked in vegetable oil. It was because she couldn't get enough meat, so she grew vegetables to prevent starvation. I followed by paraphrasing Professor Seyfried in how he explains the cancer growth mechanism. It happens when mitochondria are disrupted and don't have enough oxygen, so cells switch to producing energy from respiration to fermentation, which then triggers their uncontrolled division, or in other words, cancer. For cancer to grow, glucose and glutamine are needed. And since our bodies turn carbs into glucose, it makes sense to me to exclude them from diet and have my body to switching to making ATP from ketones instead of glucose. By quoting these two experts, I expanded my answer to the friend. I explained why I want to maintain ketogenic state. Finally, I quoted Dr. Palmer to expand my answer on why I stay away from alcohol. It is to avoid brain damage. There are other ways to have fun and joy than poisoning ourselves. By the way, by recklessly damaging your health or avoiding to take care of it, you also make it hard on the others around you, especially those that love you and sincerely care about you. At this point, I'll say thank you for listening to me. Next time, I plan to share my answers to the questions my friends asked me after I revealed that I became a carnivore. If you have any questions, shoot them my way and I'll incorporate the answers to your questions as well in my next episode. You've been listening to the podcast of Ilze. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and share it to show me your support and help me grow. If you want to learn more about me, my causes, my products, and my services, please visit my website ilzebe.com. That's ILZEBE.com. Disclaimers. In this podcast, I talk about mental and physical health and what has helped me to heal. Nothing that I say should be regarded as medical advice. If you have any medical condition, consult your doctor. Also, I'm an artist and storyteller. I'm sharing my stories because that's what artistic people do. Take it as fiction and as a form of my art. Even though I may sound as if I'm recalling events from my past, I don't confirm they actually happened. And if they did, I'm not blaming or accusing anyone, nor should you. I take all my life lessons with gratitude, trusting that they are given to me to expand my soul.